Imbue them with your truth, that they will speak to us the words that you need us to hear this day. May these words honor and glorify you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. I pray this in your holy name. Amen. There was a woman incarcerated in jail, and quickly she learned that the crime that she had committed was one of the ones on the bottom of the list. There's a hierarchy in jail, and depending on the crime, you have a certain standing. And those who did the most reprehensible crimes, well, they were really looked down on. They were not welcomed among the other criminals. They were seen as unworthy somehow. And even though the jail offered Bible studies and some worship, this woman felt she couldn't go. She felt that people would look down on her and judge her and make her feel unwelcome. There happened to be a Kairos weekend. Kairos is a ministry outreach to women in prison. And she had signed up for it. And as they divided into their small groups, which they called families, at the very beginning, she kind of sat on the edge of her little group and would barely speak. And the other women were talking about the Bible studies that were going on and the other things that were happening. And they were all excited about this weekend where they were going to really get close to God and be empowered to learn how to share their faith and be in ministry to their fellow inmates. But this woman held back. And finally she said, as they were bubbling over with enthusiasm, I don't go to those. She just whispered it. You could barely hear her. Another woman leaned forward and said, I'm sorry, what did you say? And she said, I don't go to those. Oh, you should come. It'd be wonderful. You can sit with me and we'll have a really good time. They're great Bible studies. Right now, this is what we're studying. No, I can't go. I wouldn't be welcome. And tears started flowing down her cheeks. And the woman who was speaking to her just stopped. And she said, oh, sweetie, you come with me. And I'll take 2 chairs and I'll put them aside. Everybody else will be sitting in the circle, but we'll sit back here and I'll sit right by your side and I'll be with you every minute. And I'll let you know that you are welcome there. You don't have to go by yourself at all. And the one woman just started weeping because nobody had offered to see her as a person the whole time she'd been there. And she just started sobbing. So the other inmate got up and got down on her knees in front of the chair and wrapped her arms around this woman, and she says, you know what? I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be with you. She saw her as a person, and that's all she wanted. She had felt isolated from God and isolated from everybody else there because nobody saw her as a person. They just saw her as the crime. And she was so desperate to be heard and seen and made to feel welcome. There was a young couple who looked like they had it all. They'd gotten married, they'd bought a house, they had a beautiful child, they were doing fine. And everybody would look at them and say, wow, they've got it so easy. They haven't hit any rough times. They've already got a house, they've both got good jobs, they're working full time. They don't know what trouble is. Just wait. It's going to happen to them someday, and boy, I don't know if they can handle it. People thought that about them. Very few people got to know them very well because they kept thinking they had it already. They didn't need friends. They had everything. What they didn't know is that this young couple had fallen into such an easy mistake. When they were first married, they were buying their house. They were setting up their new life together. They both had jobs, and boy, they had credit card offers out the yin-yang. And they took them. And now their credit card debt was so huge. They could not see a way to get beyond it. They had used up all their savings. They had tried to consolidate. They had defaulted in some areas. They were hanging on by tooth and nail, and they knew that if either of them lost a job, got injured and couldn't work, they were sunk. They would lose their house. They would lose everything. They were desperate, and nobody knew. They would just look at them and go, oh, they are like the perfect family. They're doing everything right. They have nothing tough in their life at all. Or there was a woman who was the manager of a big office, and she worked hard and was very successful, but all her office workers, they kind of thought she was a little bit arrogant, a little stuck up, kind of thought she was too good for everybody else. They used to invite her to go to the movies with them or for an evening event or to come celebrate Thanksgiving in their homes, and she would always say no. So after a while, they stopped inviting her. She didn't even eat lunch in the break room. She ate lunch at her desk by herself. So they said, well, you know, she's got money, she's got position, she's got power. I guess she doesn't need us. She's fine the way she is. Inside, this woman is screaming. She is dealing with chronic pain and takes prescription pain pills every single day just to get through her work day. She doesn't have any energy, any strength to do anything else. She just can't imagine doing anything else. And so her whole life has been taking the pills to get through the job, to pay the bills. And she's so alone. So alone. And hurting so bad. And nobody knows. And then there's another family. And they have a grown son of whom they are very proud. He's a doctor or a lawyer, I don't remember which. And they're very proud, and they love to tell stories about when he was growing up. And they get all that, you know, that comic that's out there that has 3 women on donkeys, and one says, there's a bumper sticker on the back of the donkey, and one says, my son's a lawyer, and the other says, my son's a doctor, and then the middle woman says, my son is God. Took you a minute, but you got there. Everybody kind of thought they had a little bit of that going for them. Man, they have this great kid. He's now up. He's successful. They have this wonderful family life. Everything's going good for them. They've got it made now. But they never listen and pay attention to the fact that the only times they talk about their son, they're talking about their son when he was young, when he was growing up, when he was in college. They never mention what their son is doing right now. They'll say what his job is, but they don't talk about him as a person, because he will not talk to them. He has decided that they are outdated, and he doesn't agree with their views, and he doesn't agree with their politics, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with them, so he does not return phone calls. He won't answer the phone when they call. He won't respond to emails. He won't respond to letters. He has cut them off entirely, and they have this huge gaping hole in their hearts for their child who doesn't want to know them. And nobody knows. Nobody can see it. Then there's Hannah. And on the surface, you might say, it's true, Hannah doesn't have children. And in that day and age, that's often how a woman is valued, is by the children she produces. But look at this. There's another wife in the family who's producing lots of children, sons and daughters, and Hannah, is the favored one. She gets extra portions, she gets extra presents, she gets extra attention, and she doesn't have to deal with having children. She's getting everything. She has it made, and yet she whines and complains all the time. She tries to tell her husband, and her husband says what good husbands, I'm sure, do when their wife is complaining. He says, aren't I good enough for you? Which, to be honest, if my husband said that to me, but my husband wouldn't. My husband would say, you know what? It's not that you are worth 10 sons, or I'm worth 10 sons. It's that you are worth 10 sons to me. I'm nothing without you. But nobody says that to Hannah. They all say, look, you've got me. You've got double portions. You've got everything. What are you complaining about? And they turn a blind eye to Peninnah, who says things like, oh, Hannah, I was up all night last night with the baby. You know how, oh, wait, you don't know how that is, do you? Oh, we get to go take little Jehoshaphat in for his naming ceremony at the temple today. I'm so excited. Remember how, oh, no, you don't know how that feels, do you? Oh, here, let me show you how to diaper the baby, because you've never had to do that, have you? Day in, day out, for years. For years, she has this constant, spiteful little treatment from the woman she shares a husband with. Her husband arrogantly assumes that the gift of him is good enough, and she should be happy. And nobody listens to her. Nobody understands that she actually has no life. Because in that day and age, the understanding of life was not life everlasting and salvation. It was life until death. And a woman knew that if she didn't have sons, she was completely dependent on her husband. And as soon as he died, she's destitute. Her life is cut off. And Hannah's situation, maybe Peninnah's sons would take care of her. But considering the animosity in that family, you can't really count on that. So she is looking at her husband, who is older than her, and thinking, my life will end when he dies. There is no future for me at all. And nobody can hear it. And it says in Scripture that she goes to the house of the Lord regularly. But she has kept that relationship with God similar to how the relationships with people have been. It has been a two-dimensional relationship. She hasn't really laid it all out for God. She hasn't really told her story. She hasn't stood up and said to God, I am hurting. She goes and she makes offerings and she does what's expected of her until finally she's so broken inside and filled with tears and frustrated that nobody is understanding her pain, that she rises and goes by herself to the temple and just starts telling everything to God. All her fears and her emptiness and her hurt and how nobody values her, how she is seen as nothing. Nothing. That even though, yes, her husband loves her and gives her extra, he won't even listen to her pain. And then there's Eli, who does it again. He looks at her, and rather than wondering what she's saying, he makes an assumption. Woman, what are you doing here in church drunk? You go home, take your wine, and go. But Hannah won't do it. She's had it. She's had it of people not listening to her, and she turns to the priest, a position of authority and power, a man, and she says, I am not drinking. I have had nothing to drink. I am here pouring myself out to God, and I am not leaving this spot. Have pity on me in my worthlessness. And Eli backs off, and he says, may God grant your petition. But in those words, Hannah heard something else. Because Scripture tells us that as she got up and left, her heart was already changed. She was no longer filled with pain and weeping. She was filled with hope and joy. Because Hannah lifted herself out from these tears and the weeping and the outpouring of her pain and her anguish, lifted herself up out of those waters of suffering, and heard someone say, you are not worthless. You are the beloved child of God. And with you, I am pleased. There's a lesson there for us. It's not enough that we learn how to share who we are with each other. We also have to share who we are with God, for that is the basis of all things. We don't hold back our joys, and we certainly should never hold back our pains. We should pour it all out to God so that we can then hear in those moments of silence right after we speak. We can hear, we can feel, we can know, we can receive the touch that says, you and Hannah and Penina and Elkanah and everyone. But you, at this moment, are the beloved child of God. And in you, God has pleasure and hope and joy. And all the people say,